Barbara and Rebecca, and thank you so much. And hopefully, thank you everyone's coming to learn on Erev Yom Tov. It's a big deal. It's a lot going on, getting ready for a 2-day Yom Tov. Even for us in Eretz Yisrael, we don't keep 2 days, but because we keep the second day Shabbos. But nevertheless, it's 48 hours of Shabbos and Yom Tov, so it's a lot of prep. So let's we don't take that lightly. Let's bring up the halachas. We're learning about something, and we're actually very grateful for from our shmooze that Jake posted about the Eiruv Tavshilin to remind everyone to make an Eiruv Tavshilin. We're learning the laws of Eiruv Chatzeiros, which is carrying, but also we have to remember today to make the Eiruv Tavshilin tonight, so we could help us. So we should be able to cook from Shabbos from Friday into Shabbos, or from Yom Tov into Shabbos.
But we would do it. We would do it tomorrow night.
Yeah. I'm ready Thursday. I'm saying so, but
yeah.
Thursday, not night, but do it before Yom Tov comes in. Okay.
Before Yom Tov comes, before I light the candles.
We light the candles. Yes. Okay. So we're holding law number 5. Bias. Okay, we're learning about the laws again of Eiruv Chatzeiros, which again is a takana instituted by King Solomon, that to make sure that with all the privacy that people have of Erev or a Chatzir, where people could kind of spend the whole Shabbos never really going into public domain, and then they would be forgetful about the laws of Shabbos and the prohibition of carrying in a Carmelis or a public domain. So Shlomo Melech wanted that everyone, no matter what, even if you live in a Chatzir, in a courtyard, and you have a shul there, and you have neighbors there, and it's covered like we have in our picture, it's covered, there's all the qualifications to make it a private space, but it is semi-public because everyone has access and everyone has their own private home. So you have to kind of make us. He made it to make an Erev that we should come together and we should never forget the laws of Shabbos, so to say, because everyone knows that you have to make the Eiruv Chatzeiros and therefore remind everyone about the laws of Shabbos and therefore remind everyone about the prohibitions of carrying on Shabbos. So we're still in the laws of defining of how do you make an Eiruv Chatzeiros when we have more than one chatzir, let's say, that join together, 2 courtyards that join together, or a courtyard that joins together with a mavoi, with an alleyway. So that's also common. Like we took a video here in Yerushalayim down the road from me, literally across the street. There's a chatzir called Batei Ran, and then there's an alleyway, which although it's open to the public, but it's not exactly public. It's a private lane, so to say, a foot lane for others. Hold on, Aaron. We didn't start learning yet. So then if you want to join the 2 courtyards with the mavoi, with an alleyway, etc. Yes, Aaron. All right. Bayis sheyesh bo shtei diros. A house that has 2. I think we learned this law. Yes. So we learned. We're holding law number 6. So we're holding the law of how do you make an Erev? So we learned all the laws basically of communal living, apartments in a building, or people that have rooms in a house. So we have to create something that would make it permissible for everyone to carry. Again, there's two categories when it comes to the Erev. One is that there's taking the things from your private space, your little of a studio, your house, into the courtyard, into the communal space, even though that communal space is private for the community, meaning for the people who live in what we define as the chatzir. That could be a house together, etc. So there's carrying the things that you have in the public space, in the communal space, and there's taking these things from your private space into the communal space. So without an Eiruv Chatzeiros, you can't bring from your house, which is more private, into the next level, so to say, of communal use, which would be the courtyard. Although for people that don't live in the courtyard, it's all private space. Okay. So, but how do we make the Eiruv? What's the best? He adds in the parentheses, in the most perfect way, or the best way done. One of those who are one of the people that live in the courtyard, meaning someone who lives there. Leikeach be'erev Shabbos takes on the Friday. Again, this doesn't have to be done every Friday. That's why traditionally we use matzahs. Matzahs stays fresh. Challahs, bread does not, right? Kikar echad shalom. Take one complete loaf of bread. Mishaloi, from his own. It means he owns the bread. Okay, this is one of the things that we learned about also in the Erev Tavshilin, which is applicable to tonight or to me and tomorrow for those who are still on Wednesday, is that you take something that you own and you there's another person, the acher, and that other person is on behalf of everyone else. He's the one who's going to accept it as if now we're making this loaf of bread is communal for everyone. He says it in a language that the person understands, meaning to read Aramaic or Hebrew, and the person doesn't understand Hebrew, again, defeats the purpose. So we have to, even if one could read the Hebrew, but you don't understand the Hebrew or the Aramaic, make sure to also say it in English, or whatever language that you know. Take this loaf of bread. So the person who's giving the bread, who's doing the Eruv, says to the second person who's representing the community, take this loaf, acquire it for everyone who lives in this courtyard or these courtyards, if it's more than one courtyard that are joining. The second person who's taking it on behalf of the community takes the kikar. Tefach has to lift it off the ground about a tefach, which is about 3 inches, a fistful. So that's part of the process of kinyan. So the kohenet is lifting up his hands. Then you take it back. The person who's making the Eruv. Again, so Barbara asked, what about in the case where you're doing an Eruv Tavshilin? This is a similar system. You're doing an Eruv Tavshilin for cooking, and there's no one there, so then you can't be mezaka. Also, either way, you're not really being mezaka. You don't need to if you're the only person who's cooking. But in this case, you want everyone to be part of it, because the point is that everyone now has ownership of this Eruv, and that creates the community so everyone could carry. So then the person takes it back, the one who's making the Eruv on behalf of the community. He makes the blessing. Blesses Hashem, King of the universe, Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvaysav, who sanctified us with his mitzvahs, v'tzivanu, he commanded through his chachamim. When we say tzivanu, when we make a blessing on a rabbinic takana, which Eruv is, by Shlomo HaMelech, it's still tzivanu, because he told us we should listen to the chachamim. So we have to listen to the chachamim. Al mitzvahs Eruv, for the mitzvah of Eruv, the commandment of Eruv. And then he says again, the reason why he's saying this in Aramaic is because that was the English of the time. So he says like this. We'll read it first in Hebrew, then in English. B'hadein eruva yehi sharei lana lafuke ula'ayule min habatim lachotzer umin hachotzer labatim umin bayis labayis. So what does he say? He says, by means of this Eruv, it will be permissible for us to take, meaning us, all the community, to take out and to bring in from the houses into the courtyard, and from the courtyard into the houses, and from one house to another house, because that also, you can't take from your house to the next house unless there is an Eiruv Chatzeiros. And like we learned, even through the window. For anyone who's Jewish, who's obviously under the restrictions of Shabbos, who live in this courtyard, because the second person was so to say acquired this loaf of bread on behalf of the community. So now everyone is permissible, can have access to it. Like we said before, the Eruv has to be in a space that everyone could get to, even if they have to knock on the door, but at least it has access. And when Shabbos comes in, it should be in the house of the person who makes the Eruv. And then it's as if everyone lives in one house, because everyone has ownership of the food in that house, because it's everyone's Eruv. It kind of makes it a single space, and therefore it affects that everyone can carry from their houses to the courtyard, from the courtyard to the houses, and from house to the next house, and that unites everyone. So that is how one makes an Eiruv Chatzeiros in a courtyard, or courtyards that are making a single Eiruv Chatzeiros. And then what we have afterwards is the mavoi, which is the alleyway, which all the chatzers come to. So even if they have separate chatzeiros that make their own eruv, then they make a shituf, which kind of combines, like we had in the picture, all the effort of the different courtyards, and they combine it and make it another single entity. But what we have today is, and what I was discussing with Rebecca, what we have today is, again, who makes the Eiruv Chatzeiros for us today? If you live in Borough Park or Brooklyn or Manhattan or in Yerushalayim, for that matter, right? Where you live in Yerushalayim, I'm not making an Eiruv Chatzeiros. I'm not making a courtyard, a Eiruv with my courtyard. So the rabbis, the rabbanut, whoever's in charge of the city, does it on behalf of the community and turns the whole city into a single chotzer. That's why we don't do the shituf. It's not a whole bunch of separate courtyards. It's one big courtyard called the Yerushalayim, Borough Park, Manhattan. But therefore, you have to be careful. If they didn't combine the Eruv, so if one Eruv is, if there's separation between Borough Park and, I don't know, Flatbush, in theory, so you can't just carry from one community to the next, because it just makes that whole space into a single courtyard. Here we have, I just bring up the picture again to show you in this illustration over here, the shituf. The shituf is the partnership of the alleyway. So each one of these doors are representing courtyards, and these gentlemen here are representing, each one is a representative of their courtyard, and they come together and they make a second unity, and that allows carrying between the chatzeiros themselves, between one chatzer and the next, via the alleyway, if, like it says that you have in the back of the picture here, if the alleyway was privatized. It means the alleyway itself has to be made into an Eiruv. So like you have, I don't know if you can see in the back, you have the lechi and the koira, the things that you have to put on an alleyway to make an alleyway. Let's say here's the alleyway right here between. So you would have to put something that would privatize the alleyway through what's called a lechi, like a sidewall and an overpass if it's open from both sides, so making like a doorpost, and then that kind of privatizes the alleyway. But even if the alleyway is private, you still have to make a separate shituf to combine the courtyards. Okay, let's see the footnotes. So it says like this: a loaf of bread. Okay, bread is required. Why does he say a loaf of bread? Bread is okay. This you have to remember. This is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. There's an entire tractate called Eiruvei that deals with the laws of Eiruv. There's Shabbos and Eiruvei. And when one learns the Rambam, which Chabad, where the Rebbe taught us, we should learn Rambam daily. The laws of Eiruvei are not easy, because what is considered an open alleyway and a closed alleyway, and all the difference of the foods that you use for the alleyway union versus the courtyard union. So let's see what he says here. Why does he say a loaf of bread? Bread is required because Eiruv Chatzeiros, specifically Chatzeiros, versus the shituf, versus the unity of the alleyway, makes the place of the Eiruv your place of dwelling. Okay, so this is very important footnote. Means, what are we accomplishing with the Eiruv Chatzeiros? Which, like he said, like we say at the end over here, that nechshavim ki'ilu kulam daru bayis hazeh. What happens when you make an Eiruv? It's as if everyone lives in that house. It's not that we're making a partnership, which is the alleyway. That's separate. Here we're making it that this is my dwelling place. We all live here. I am sleeping somewhere else, right? So this makes the place, the Eiruv, your place of dwelling. Only bread will serve this purpose, says the Mishnah Brura. Means you need something chashuv, something that's special. You can't take a mazonas, a cookie, or a piece of fish alone. So the only something that's as important as bread will be the sign that where the Eiruvei is my house. That's why the question we saw that the person wrote to the rabbi of Crown Heights that the people weren't accepting the Eiruv, and therefore they make an Eiruv Chatzeiros in their apartment building, and you go away for Shabbos, you have to have access to the apartment. If I live there, I have to be able to go there. You may not make an Eiruv Chatzeiros with a piece of bread. even a large one. Listen to this, not just the bread. It has to be a loaf of bread. You must use a whole one. It doesn't say that it has to be big. It has to be at least the size of a kazayas, which is, let's say, it could be a roll too. Today, again, we use a matzah. Matzah, complete matzah, right, is like a complete challah roll. You can make a motzi on it, right? We do that on Pesach or whenever we're out of lechem mishnah. So you have to use either a full loaf of bread or a matzah, but a whole one, not a piece of bread and not a slice of bread. Okay, so footnote number 17. Why do you have to lift it off the tefach? Because that's a sign of kinyan. How do you make a kinyan? When you lift it up, meshicha or elevation. So says the Shulchan Aruch 3669 or the Mishnah Berurah 36651. 18, okay, it's a reference. 19, what are we talking about? Even if we did not say the bracha, the Eiruv is valid and carrying is permitted. Okay, this is an important point. If a person forgets to make the bracha, this is b'chlal a point on brachas b'chlal. A blessing doesn't make the thing happen. The blessing is we're blessing Hashem for the mitzvah that we're doing, but the mitzvah itself is the action of the Eiruv. So if we have the ceremony, so to say, where the person takes the complete loaf of bread and gives it to the next person who takes it on behalf of the community, and then you say that this Eiruv is supposed to combine making everyone one home, then even if you didn't make the blessing, the Eiruv is still valid, although we should make a bracha because we're doing a mitzvah, so we make a bracha for a mitzvah. But not making the bracha, or forgetting to make the bracha, doesn't make the Eiruv invalid. Okay, footnote number 20. Okay, what are we talking about over here? For all those Jews live in the house of the courtyard. He says, even if he did not say this, it also becomes a valid Eiruv. Okay, so now he says another point. Even if he doesn't say this whole wording in Aramaic of right? You didn't say the actual wording or articulating that I'm making this Eiruv so everyone could carry, but you did, the person took it on behalf of everyone and you gave it on behalf of everyone, so it's still valid, says the Shulchan Aruch Rav, the Alter Rebbe. But if he said only part of it and not all of it, the Pri Megadim says that it may not be a valid Eiruv. Sometimes it's better to say nothing than to say something wrong, because if you say nothing, it means we could translate that as if you're just lacking in your wording, what you articulated, but you meant everything. When you say only half, then we clearly only have half, and therefore it's better. Not that you shouldn't say it, but in theory it would be better if you didn't say anything than if you'd only say half, according to the Pri Megadim. Okay, footnote number 20 is, since they acquired on the beginning of Shabbos, the place where it must be, the place where it must be no less than 4 amos by 4 amos, means the place that houses the Eiruv has to be considered a home. So it has to be a place, and what's a home? A square 4 amos, which is about a square, so let's say 8 to 12 to 16 feet. If it is a room of less than 4 by 4, but the apartment is large enough, it is questionable if it is valid, says the Shemirat Shabbos Kalachah Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So there's different. They used to put it in sometimes a communal space, but Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that if it's not, I don't know what he means, 4 by 4, but the apartment is large enough. Maybe the room is less than 4, but the apartment itself is larger. So then it's okay. So says Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Okay. Let's do the next law. Oh, now we're going back to what we said before. Then what are we doing over here? And unlike an Erev Tafshilim, a person tonight or tomorrow, when we make the Erev, that's going to make it permissible to to cook. So you could even use your sons or daughters who are children, because you just need that. You're just making it permissible for you to cook. It's not. But over here, we're talking about you're trying to combine the community. So therefore, he says, Zarach l'zakis tafka de'acher, has to be someone else that's taking it on behalf of the community. You should not give it to your children, a son or a daughter, to take it on behalf of the courtyard, the chatzer. Even let's say they have their own place. Let's say you have a young son who's independent and lives alone, so he could be considered a Mosa person in the Chatzer. Mishum diyadam kiyadei, but because they're your children, then they're as if they're just an extension of your hand. So if the extension of your hand, then it's not someone else. We need someone else. That's the idea of acher. But as another person's child means it's not the age question. There has to be someone else. But another person's child, let's say your neighbor's child, could take the loaf of bread on behalf of the community. Because when it comes to rabbinic things, unlike biblical things or things of Eiraisa, a young child is able to be the one that zoich, even though a child is usually not someone that could do something on behalf of adults. But when it comes to something rabbinic, we're more lenient. Even your own wife, you shouldn't use as the person who takes the loaf of bread on behalf of the community, even though she's independent. Because you're responsible for her food. Hold on a second. Okay, because then he shouldn't have his wife if he's responsible for her food. And also, even if you have adult children, but your adult children live by you and eat by you, it's called smuchim al shulchani. Smuchim al shulchani is a concept that when you have children, even if they're adults, so they're independent, but they live, let's say Aaron, right? You talk about your son. Your son is older than 13. If he eats by you in the house, then he's called smuchim al shulchanai. He's soimach. He depends on you, on your table, meaning he eats the food that your wife cooks, that his mother cooks. So he's not really independent. So too, the wife is not really separate from the husband. Mishum diyesharim, because there's an opinion, the gam elu nechshavim kiyadai, because when someone is dependent on you, so it's like an extension of your hand. So even though they're adults, children or a wife, but because they need you you're the earner, and therefore they eat. What would be the case if the woman earns separately? Possibly be different. But here we're talking about in general, there's an opinion that a close-knit family where they eat together is like one family. And the point is they're trying to find someone else to combine the community. It means you can't if you can't make an error between your family and trying to via do that include other people, because you're not really including other people. You want other people, that is someone else, and that someone else has to be someone who's kind of disconnected from your table. But in worst case scenario, that there's no one there but your wife or your older children, then they could also take it on behalf because technically they are independent. What happens if you have a daughter-in-law? Right, your son marries another woman. Then sorry, if the son is married, so even though he eats every night dinner in his parents' home, but the fact that he's mamish married, that's separation, and therefore it's not such a codependence, and therefore the son who's married could be the one to receive the loaf of bread on behalf of the community. Okay, let's see the footnotes here. What are we talking about here? He may not grant ownership through his sons or daughters who are minors. Rambam, however, the Mishnah Berurah says you can be makel here if necessary. So we said that if you can't find someone else, then your adult children and wife could be the ones that are acquiring ownership on behalf of the community. The Mishnah Berurah says that even your own children, again, we're talking about a rabbinic thing here. It's not midaraisa. It's remember Shlomo Melech did a takana. So we could be makel, we'll be lenient to allow for, even in such a case, to use your children if there's no adult children around or your wife is not around. It's better even if no neighbors around. Okay. 23 is because the children are an extension of your hand. Therefore, they are not making the acquisition, for it is as though he himself has picked up his own bread. It means if the children are an extension of your hand, the whole point is someone else has to acquire it on behalf to unite everyone. But your children are part of you, so therefore it's really as if defeats the purpose. But again, according to the Mishnah Berurah, even less in the worst case scenario, that's also okay. Okay. chapter number 25. And he says for according to some authorities, they too are considered an extension of his hand, a wife or adult children who always eat in your house. Since according to halacha, anything they find belongs to them. Okay, what would make it that they're really an extension of his hand? So the footnote explains the halacha reason why. The rule is like this in general in Torah, that if someone is dependent on you, means he eats or she eats at your table. So children is not even a question. Children are an extension of, means young children under the age of bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah are an extension of the father's hand. So there's no separation there. But if you have a child or even your wife who's 100% dependent on you, so the halacha is that a mitzvah, they find something that belongs to the household, to the head of the household. Why? Because the head of the household has to bring income to feed everyone. You can't live off your father and have no food of your own, no independence, and then have something on the side. You're taking it. You find something. If you work, it's something else. But if you find something, the halach is that if you find something and you're dependent on your father's table, then it belongs to the father because everything has to go back to the communal pot, so to say. And because that's the halach when it comes to mitzvah, so therefore they're not really separate, and therefore they shouldn't be the ones that take the Eiruv Chatzeiros on behalf of the community. Okay. Number 26, he quotes the source. Okay, and the question is, Kamahu shir ha'eruv. What is the amount of bread required for the eruv? So we said a loaf of bread. Yes, Rebecca.
What you just said about that if somebody's dependent on their father and they come into some money or something, like it belongs to the father, like does that apply? Let's say you get like a random rebate from like a refund or something from your health insurance company and your parent pays a lot of your expenses. So then do you have to give the money to your parent?
Okay, so that's a good point. So I think again I cannot pass in the halacha because this is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, so we're running on minimal info here. But based on the idea is if your parents paid your insurance, they pay the premium, and you got money based on the fact that they're paying your premium. It's not so simple that they shouldn't get the money.
Or like if they
Sorry, you're breaking up.
pay part of the taxes and you get a tax rebate, then it would go to them.
It's possible, yeah. That's kind of Shemirat Shulchan means not that they come over to have a meal every once in a while in your house. Shemirat Shulchan means that the word Shemirat means the dependent. They depend. Their food is dependent on you're serving them. They don't have. That means they need you, and that's what Shemirat Shulchan. So you could have an adult. So that we said that if the son is married, so then it's different. So then that maybe also make it different for when we're talking about the mitzvah finding something, or like I said, a rebate. But if someone's mamish dependent, so again, it's also the question you would have to ask Allah why. For instance, I'll give an example. Let's say my son last year Pesach, I bought him a ticket to go home, and the rule in England, in Europe, is unlike in America. There's actually a law passed by the EU that any airline that comes in or out of the EU, and there's a flight that comes in and out of the EU, not just that you're flying from India to Pakistan, but they also happen to have flights to Europe. But if the actual flight goes through Europe and there's a delay, no matter what, if they have rules, if it's a half hour, 5 hours, after a certain amount of time, they legally have to pay you. There's a law. They have to pay you a certain amount of money that was decided by the European Union that every person is entitled if you get stuck in a flight that passes through Europe. So my son flew from Israel to Barcelona to Morocco, and in Barcelona, over there, someone in Barcelona caused him to miss his flight in Morocco. He got stuck for 24 hours in Morocco. He was compensated $600 by the airline. They had to give it to him because the European law. Now, the question is, who gets that money? I paid for the ticket, or he does. But the truth is, why did they pass the law? They didn't pass the law because I paid for the ticket. They passed the law because my son suffered for 24 hours. So he did the suffering. That's always the same thing with applying the rebate. Why did the rebate come back? If it's coming back for something that you personally suffered, not because of the person who paid it, so then it's not so simple. But if it's mamish coming from the fact that the person paid your insurance for you, your parent paid the insurance for you, then probably should go back to the person who paid for it.
Right. I think in this particular case, it was that they billed me twice for the same copay, and I paid the same copay 2 times, so they realized they double billed it, and then they sent back one of
Okay.
them.
So if they send it back, if you paid it, then you get it back. If your parents
Right.
paid it, they get it back.
But does it make a difference if the whether the child works or not? Because like in this
Yeah.
case, like I have my own income and they just help with certain things.
Yeah, so that would maybe that's what I'm saying. That's probably why I'm saying it says over here that if the son is married, right? We said if the son is married, then even though he's even Alpha Bishul Samach Shulchan Aviv, the Kol Omi Echel Zakais, is according to the Ramah, but probably it's connected to that idea because he's married. Even though he's dependent, or the couple now is dependent on the parents, but there's certain levels of independence that would maybe affect even this law. So we have to check those laws more in detail, and the laws of Samech HaShulchan, and the idea of what does it mean to a mitzvah. Mitzvah, but you bring a good example. Mitzvah by definition means not something that you earned. If you work for, if your daughter it's not, again, that's also not so simple. And that's even till today, if everyone is eating in one house, so and the father and mother don't have, and they need everyone's help. If everyone works, the money should go back to the main pocket so everyone could eat. Not that someone should put in the money in the bank and the parents are sitting there and they don't know how to pay the bills. So there's a kind of, and someone just mentioned to me recently, he says, I don't understand. The two children work and they live at home, so why aren't they helping the parents with the bills? Some mamish just mentioned this to me a few weeks ago over here in a case in Yerushalayim. So these questions do come up, and there's halacha questions in theory. It's not so simple. The parents can't demand that the children participate in paying the bills if they're earning and they're living in their house. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, in the Syrian community, because my wife even said this to our kids, that we will take care of you until you're married. So, like, you could leave earlier than and you're not married, but there has been cases even in the past where there's 50-year-olds who didn't get married and they're still living at home. But the parents will take care. They don't ask for anything. They don't want anything. They want you to save your money so that when you get married, you have something to start your life with. So they say, until you're married. As soon as you're married, you're off the pay list. Then you should have enough money saved up and you can go get your own place. And, but if you must, and it's a multi-family house, they help you out. But the point is that you're not totally independent until you're married. And
Yeah,
you could.
but that's not obligatory. The point is that even if that's a Syrian minhag, and it could, and I'm not putting it light if that's mamish the minhag like written in stone, or just happens to be the custom. But if it's mamish the custom that they've accepted upon themselves, maybe there's something else. But if the parents are, even if that's the custom, in a situation where the parents are suffering, and the children are earners, and they're saying, what's for supper? Why are we having tuna fish sandwiches? I would like a steak. That's
Okay, I will say this to you. In the
yeah.
Syrian community, if the son starts making oodles and oodles and oodles of money, which happens, and they haven't, even if they're married, they give a lot to the parents. So
Sure.
that's never a problem if the parents are suffering. They will make sure their parents don't suffer because they gave them a life, and so they will take care of
Sure.
them. But I'm saying in general, you're 23 or 26, you just turned 30 and you're still in college with a graduate degree or becoming a doctor, whatever it is. Who knows? But the point is that they take care of you. But as soon as you're married, then
Okay.
you're off the pay list.
Okay.
You on your own.
That's the custom. So there's a different custom, but in general, the halacha says is that if you're saying Shulchan Aviv, then the halacha is as far as like a mitzvah. Mitzvah means mitzvah is different than work, and even in work, it's not so simple. The work is halachically a child that works, the money goes back halachically. Like a child that works, the money goes back to the so to say the pot, because even though especially those days, everyone went out to work and even today in some places it's necessary. And again, maybe we should help Evan Shabbat, like you said, and we shouldn't have to come on to that. All right, but the question now is we're holding in Law 8. How do we actually technically do this? How much bread? Could you have one bread for an entire apartment building. You know, in Manhattan, where I don't know if Rebecca's apartment building specifically, but you have some place in Manhattan that you could have hundreds and hundreds of families living in one apartment building. So how many?
I think there's 500 apartments in my building, something like that.
So let's say, imagine all those 500 people were Eruv eating people. So how you cannot, one loaf of bread won't cut it for 500 people. So Kamahu Shir Eruv, how much bread do you need to have? Bisman Shehem Shmoina Aser Bali Batim Epoches. Let's say the group of the Chatzar is 18 or less of homes. We're not counting people that live in the home. Shi'uroi Kigregris, Shi'kumai Shlish Beitza. Then the amount of the size of the bread has to be of a dried fig, which is 1/3 of an egg, of a medium-sized egg. L'chol echad, to every person. So every person has to have basically 1/3 of an egg, which is more than a zayis, is a biteful, basically. Chutz mizeh, shehu oise esa erev v'nicha b'seich beisa, aside for the person who makes the Eruv and the Eruv is in his home. So it means let's say we're talking exact. Let's say one loaf of bread, 18 people, and the bread makes up of a gregris, a dried fig. So you have to have a loaf that would make up 18 dried figs if the people were 19, including the person who made the Eruv. Because the person who made the Eruv, that person doesn't have to participate in the bread because he lives in the house. The idea is what the Eruv is doing, what he's making a point is, the Eruv is making that all the people that are in the Chatzar live in his house, but he anyways lives in the house. He doesn't need to do something to demonstrate his ownership of the house. He's including everyone in his house. So the bread has to be, if it's 19 people, 18 people are others from the building. So from the Chatzar, from the courtyard, so there has to be a loaf of bread that is the least amount of a dried fig, which he says is 1/3 of an egg. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, after a while, the dried figs add up, and right, one loaf of bread won't be enough for after a certain amount of people. Okay, v'im huhem yoyse mishmoin aser, if it's more than 18. Afiluhim elef, even up to 1,000 people. Shiurim zayin shtei sudas, then it has to be the amount of 2 meals. Shem shmoina esrei gregoras, shem kamai sheish beitzim, which is 18 dried figs, which is like 6 eggs. Shem kamai shmoina beitzim, others say it's not 6 eggs, it's 8 eggs. Lefiza kigregoras u kishlish Utshi Besa. Okay. According to this their opinion means it's 8 eggs versus 6 eggs. So a dried fig is equivalent to 1/3 and 1/9 of an egg, not just 1/3 of an egg. So you add up the 1/9 comes up to 8 eggs plus 16. Let's see the footnotes on this. A loaf for the size of 18 dried figs, which is equivalent to 6 eggs. So says the Rambam. Some say it's 8 eggs. The Tur. It is best to use this amount, means make sure that you have a loaf of bread that's the size of 8 eggs. But if you make it the size of 6 eggs, it's also a valid Eruv. So says the Gaon of Vilna and the Chai Adam, the Mishnah Brura. The egg size includes the shell. Okay, so it's not just the egg, it's the shell included. So 8 eggs. Mid-sized eggs is not tiny. So 8 eggs is quite kind of, you know, eight eggs is more than a half a dozen eggs. So it's talking about the space wise. I mean, obviously it's put together, but it's not a tiny roll. Yes, Aaron.
When do you have to get the people to eat it? Do they have to eat it, or it's just symbolic and it just has to sit
symbolic.
there?
They don't have to eat it. They have to be able to eat it. It's the idea is, of course, it's symbolic. It's not like the Erev Tachumim. The Erev Tafshilin that we try to eat it on Shabbos day, like we spoke about in the Shmuz.
But then you're wasting the bread because it's just going to sit there and get hard.
That's what I said. They don't use bread today. The custom is we use matzah. Matzah. They don't eat it every week. They use, like, for instance, if the city of Yerushalayim, they make it whatever it is, once a year, once every 6 months, whatever the system is.
Okay.
Okay. Tzarich shloi yakpid ala erevim yachlanu chaveri. says it's essential that one make that the one that making the Eruv should not resent it if a neighbor eats it, right? So let's say the person says, 1 second, we're neighbors. You just made us your guests. You included me in your food, and I just had myself a nice matzah sandwich. So you shouldn't get, if you get upset about it, means that you don't really include the person. So therefore, you can't get upset about it. You can't be makbid, means you can't get, what's the word he uses? Resentful of it. Being makbid elav, but let's say you do resent the person who comes in and eats the Erev. Any Erev, then it's not an Erev, because by being resentful, it means that you don't really include everyone into your home. Therefore, he says it's essential that we're talking about in a case where they're actually, like Aaron was saying, they're actually using foods that they use for Shabbos. So let's say you put together a challah that you want to eat, and you counted on eating it, and all of a sudden you come home and it's gone. Why? Because someone else ate it. You can't get like upset. Why do you eat my challah? I was counting on eating it because you included that person in your challah. So therefore, if you're resentful, that means there was no real later. So therefore, he says, don't use a food that you plan on using for Shabbos, and this would avoid yourself becoming resentful. Yes, Aaron.
As Islama, Sephardics only count matzah as bread on Passover. So so they couldn't use matzah because they think it's not hamotzi anymore after Passover.
Very good question. I see what you're saying. Because he's saying if the matzah is considered a cracker and not a hamotzi, it's a good question. I don't know. We have to find out if what the Rabbane. If you do bread, you can't use moldy bread. You have to use food that's edible. So you can't use a thing that's not edible.
It's a very edible matzah, but they consider it a cracker after matzah.
I know what you're saying. So I'm saying my point is that if they can't be using a loaf of bread, because if they're using a loaf of bread, they have to change it every single week. I mean, because it doesn't really bread doesn't last for a week, so it's not edible after a week. I mean, pretty much. So I mean, it's less just like that kind. Maybe they use those breads that you buy in the supermarket that last forever, but
Those unhealthy.
so it's a good question. I have to check into that. Maybe for the Erev, again, Erev is rabbinic. Maybe they're makel to call it a moitzi.
I just know they remind me all the time that our matzah only for a week of Passover.
So as far as them don't use it even for Shabbos for Lech Mishnah, right?
No, they wait, listen, all matzah is, except for the egg matzah, can be used for a motzi only during Passover. And then it becomes a cracker. And I've asked them many times why. That's the way it is, and we're going to keep it that way.
No. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. It's a good, very excellent question. Let me check into that. Okay, so he says like this: it's essential he shouldn't be resentful if the neighbor comes and eats it, who is included in the Erev. Obviously, we're talking about no. But his point is the footnote is let's say it's if you're okay, you should never be resentful if someone touches your food. That's another midah but we're not talking about over here midas chasidus. We're talking about the halacha. If someone was not included in the Erev and you find them in your house eating your bread that you were counting on and you're resentful, that doesn't disqualify the Erev because that person was never included in the Erev. But if your neighbor that was included in the Erev and you basically were saying that this person could be part of my meal and he's eating the meal that you included him in and you're resentful, then you should show that you didn't really include him or her. So therefore, it only applies to someone who eats it that was included in there, but someone out from the street or that wasn't included in there, then I'm not saying it's okay to be resentful, but being resentful doesn't disqualify it. Okay, on Erev Shabbos or during twilight, but after that, once the Erev takes effect, even if you do not allow your neighbor to eat from it, it is a valid Erev. Okay, this is the Bir Halacha points out something we learned in the beginning of the week, in the beginning of this class, that the whole idea is that the Erev has to cross over into Shabbos. So if the person ate it, the scenario is quite kind of difficult. On Erev Shabbos during twilight, we have to check the Bir Halacha for more insight, but basically what he wants to say is that we've said many times that once it goes into Shabbos and the Erev is in effect, so your being resentful won't disqualify the Erev retroactively because the Erev already created the private domain. So because the Erev already created, so to say, the single chatzir to be one space, So even though you're resentful, your resentment can't disqualify the Eruv. However, the only problem with this halacha is, I have to check into it, is if the person eats it during twilight, then there was no Eruv for it. Also, it goes both ways. The Eruv has to go into the night. If he eats it during twilight, the twilight's a short amount of time, right? During Ben Hashmashes, so the Eruv never set into effect because the person ate it, unless he ate only part of it, and there's still enough but even then also it wouldn't be disqualified. I have to check this halacha again, because he says on Erev Shabbos or during twilight. But after that, once the Erev takes effect, even if you do not allow your neighbor to eat from it, it's not valid. But what's the obvious thing? If someone eats it on Friday afternoon, then there's no Erev left. So that's another problem. So I'm not sure how it kind of goes in a circle. All right. Okay, this is the question that we had about the person in Crown Heights who said, if I leave for Shabbos and the Erev is kept in my house, so what about leaving my house locked so no one could get there? They have to be able to get there during twilight. Once twilight kicks in, then it's already, the Erev takes effect even if they have no access to it. But during twilight times, as it gets into effect, everyone has to be able to feast on it. So have access to it. So what happens? So that he's saying that's important. That it has to be that way. Here he says an interesting law. Therefore, if there was a dead person there or an adjacent apartment, and one of the tenants is a Kohen, and that tenant now can't go into the place where the Eruv is because the Kohen can't become impure, as the Kohen may become impure by some passes away. So then that one Kohen messes up not messes up, but it disrupts the whole Eruv, and therefore there's no valid Eruv, because the Eruv has to have everyone included. And that what happens if the person is not included is other laws. But as far as everyone being included, the Eruv, the Kohen can't go into the room because there's a dead person there. So he says in footnote 31, the Pri Megadim, but the Marsham says that is insufficient if the Eruv is in a place fit for dwelling, even if he cannot go there. So that it is sufficient if the Eruv is in a place fit for dwelling, even if he can't go there. So the Kohen can't go there, doesn't disrupt it according to the Marsham. The halacha that he quotes is the Pri Megadim, is another opinion. The Marsham disagrees and says you don't have to be able to go there as long as it's in a safe place. Which again would answer the question in Crown Heights if you lock the key, if you take the key with you. Okay. Yesh lasis Eiruv Chatzeiros b'chol erev Shabbos. U'b'Shabbos yivatza alav. He says the proper way to do it is that the Erev Tafshilin, like Aaron says, if you're Sephardic and you can't use matzah, so you should make an Erev Tafshilin every Erev Shabbos, and on Shabbos, Hamotzi should be said over it. You should say the Hamotzi on the Erev Tafshilin. Means you should actually eat it, not just symbolic. Kidl Kaman Simin Kuf Beis Sif Beis, as we're going to learn later in the laws of Yom Tif, in laws number 101, law 2. Kaim Rak B'Knisas Shabbos, because you only need it to be there when Shabbos goes in. But if you eat it Friday night, it's fine. The idea is that the food creates the communal space. And this is what so this is his point. His point is, I think Aaron, we're going to address your question right now. The point is like this, that if, in theory, the best thing would really be is that every week we eat the Eiruv Chatzeiros. And even if you eat it Friday night, it's okay, as long as you go into Shabbos, the food is available, it creates the communal space. But the practical sense of it is that people will forget. Like literally, we just had a shmooze about Erev Tavshilin Monday, and with all the hecticness of Yom Tif, when Jake, in this morning, when I woke up early in the morning, and I saw Jake's message of the Erev Tavshilin, it reminded me, but it was possible I would have forgotten, and I still may forget. Hopefully I don't forget, but I'm saying it's, you have to remember to do it. So therefore, he says, that's worse to forget, because then you can't carry. So if you're concerned, maybe you're going to forget one time, Yochel Eiruv b'kikar echad d'chol haShabbos is sha'ad Pesach. Again, chametz bread is chametz, so you could use something that remains for all the weeks until Pesach, but you can't have it over. You can't have chametz all over Pesach. Hold on, Rebecca. And when you say that with this Eruv, I'm including everyone for this Shabbos and all of the Shabbos until next Pesach. And this is what Aaron says. What about the Sephardic? You have to make it thin. It doesn't say matzah. You have to make it thin, cooked well, so it doesn't, and so it shouldn't get ruined in the coming weeks if you can do it. So I think they do it. I think the minhag is they do it Erev Pesach to Erev Pesach, and it could be that would answer Aaron's questions because on Pesach it's a kosher one. I'm not sure if how it works if the next week it's not. Well, the Shabbos Pesach Yasa Erev Matzik Sheira, but comes Pesach and the Shabbos, let's say Shabbos Chol Hamoed, so you can't use last year's Pesach chametz, and you can't use chametz. So you should use something that's kosher for Pesach, a matzah that's kosher for Pesach. Okay, it could be there's such a thing as let's see what he says in English. In this case, it's necessary to you that a loaf is thin and well baked, so it will not become spoiled. It could be there's a bread that's thin and well baked. It's not a matzah. Yes, Rebecca.
It's possible you said this and I just missed it, but if like a family forgets to make an Erev Tavshilin, isn't it true that they could rely on like the Rav of their shul having made it with everyone in mind?
100%. Yes. Usually the Rav, like we said, we spoke about this Monday night in the Shmuz, that the rabbi of your community, usually that's his job to make sure that he thinks, or kind of not, he doesn't have to think about every single person individually, but he says anyone who's relying on the community of this shul should be able to rely on my Erev. And definitely that's a backstop. That's definitely a fallback plan if you forget to make an Erev. But preferably you should make your own Erev.
Right. And I think I once heard that you're only allowed to rely on the rabbi's Erev Tavshilin once. Is that right or no?
We'll learn that when we get to the laws of Erev Tavshilin. It's a good question because you shouldn't just be accustomed to forgetting the laws. It's
Like that
possible.
it's like a b'diavad kind of thing and you
Yeah, but
shouldn't
yeah.
like get used to it.
And but literally, an Erev Tavshilin, especially in Eretz Yisrael, when we very rarely have 2-day Yom Tov, it's not as common. An Erev Tavshilin is something that you should set your alarm for because it's not when Yom Tov comes in and things are hectic. It's not like a mazid. It's not like you're intentionally forgetting. It's just something that's hard to remember. So
Right.
it's something you should put on your phone today to remind yourself to do it. Does it say that if you and it's very possible. I mean, literally. I spoke about it on Monday. This morning, it just wasn't in my head. When I saw Jake, I said, "Oh, good reminder." And I'm hoping that I'll stay with it until the end of today. But there's, it's. I don't know if it's that strict because it's possible people forget on a Yom Tov to Yom Tov basis when it comes around. It's not every Yom Tov. It's only when Yom Tov goes into Shabbos.
Right.
Yes, Aaron. Aaron. Okay. Footnote number 32.
Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Just to answer your question. As far as I know, the way they do it, you buy matzah for Passover. That is all the matzah is bread. As soon as Passover is over, all your leftover becomes crackers.
Okay, but it could be, I'm just saying the point is it could be that there's such a thing called a thin loaf of bread. That's not a matzah, that's a loaf of bread that stays fresh. I don't know. Like I
All right,
said,
let's
maybe
find out what it is because every
those.
bread that any Ashkenaz I've seen or any Sephardic that I've seen all get hard after 2 days of not being in the freezer.
Okay, I've had bread that you buy it, it's hard. So it depends on the kind of bread. All right. The Mishnah Brewer 368:21 says that's preferable to have an Erev in the synagogue for everyone, nevertheless. Okay. So this is where we're getting out to the actual practical law that they keep the Erev in the shul. Every person who needs an Erev should make his own every week without a bracha and grant ownership to everyone in his court in case the one in the synagogue becomes spoiled. Okay, this is back to the question that we spoke about before. We don't find that people make Eiruv Chatzeiros. I mean, I'm not familiar with it. I live in a building. Now, what happens if the Erev becomes spoiled, or worse than that, if the Erev falls down? Means that if you it's happened before. Used to be there used to be people that, for whatever reason, I'm not going to discuss it now, but they would vandalize specifically the Eruv as Shabbos came in. They would cut the Eruv because they didn't like the people keeping Shabbos. They would cut the Eruv, and then no one could carry, and the word would go out quickly. The Eruv is down, and you can carry. So then you have to have an Eiruv Chatzeiros. Then you can't carry in your apartment building either, because the Eiruv Chatzeiros is united. Is the fact that it's a Chatzir is only because there's an Eruv. But if there's no Eruv, there's no Chatzir. So, but we don't find the minhag, at least that I'm familiar with, the people in apartment buildings where there's an Eruv make a private Eiruv Chatzeiros. But here he's saying you should make it without a bracha. So just in case something goes wrong with the Eruv and Shul, you're depending on an Eruv and Shul. But what happens if that Eruv goes off? So therefore, you should have a fallback plan, and you don't make a blessing because typically you're relying on the communal one. But just in case not. But the question is, if it goes spoiled, the question is if everyone else could carry or whatever. There's a lot of questions if yours is going to be then the one for everyone, or if yours is only for your apartment building, then you can't really carry from your apartment building outside. All right, there's more to these laws than what meets the eye, put it that way. Okay. It says with the bracha, grant ownership to everyone in his court, in case the one in the synagogue. So from what they're saying in the footnote over here is that at least you could carry in your courtyard if the public one in Shul, and we're assuming the public one in Shul is either in the courtyard or even if the Shul is out of your specific courtyard. But let's say like in Yerushalayim, there's a lot of courtyards, a lot of apartment buildings, but the city with the Eruv is making it one big courtyard. So, but if that Eruv is not working, then there is no courtyards, and then you have to make your own private one. Okay. 33 says like this. The Maseches Shabbos 117b says that the Eruv should be made Erev Shabbos, and on Shabbos Hamotzi should be made over it. So says the Gemara on Shabbos. Since one mitzvah was done with it, it is fitting that another one be done with it. Means what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, why should you use it as one of your meals? Because you're taking a bread that's a mitzvah connected bread. This bread made the mitzvah of Eruv, so it's appropriate that should be the one used for the mitzvah of Suda Shabbos. The Arizal said, Hamoitzi at night over the bread from the partnership of the alley. So again, we're not, again, the law, Eruvin today has become a complicated subject that's only really understood by the few. But again, I don't believe that if they're making a city, let's say the Arizal lives in Tzfas, right? The Tzfas today has Eruv. They're not doing the Shituf. They're just making the whole Tzfas into a single courtyard, and therefore there's one Eruv that sits in the shul, let's say, or the city hall. But in the times of that Rizal, possibly they didn't do that. So they had a whole bunch of courtyards, and the courtyards were also, as everyone knows who's in Tzfas, right? So there's a lot of courtyards and a lot of alleyways. So they made the shituf. The shituf is the combined courtyards with the alleyway. So that's a separate food. The Arizal would eat the food from the shituf. The Holy Arizal will eat the food from the shituf of the alleys on Shabbos. What do you say? Friday night? At night, Friday night. And in the morning of the loaf of the Eiruv Chatzeiros. So he ate both. The Eruv, because he's supposed to do both. So he did the Eruv Tafshilin, he ate the Eruv of the alleys Friday night, and then he ate the Eruv of the Chatzir Shabbos day. Obviously, the Rizal did everything according to Kabbalah. For Kabbalistic reasons, he did it not just because that's what he wanted to eat. Obviously, there's something a little more deeper than that. Just one more law before we finish off, because it's connected to this week. Ein oisim Erev Chatzeiros b'Yom you don't need to make an Erev Chatzeiros on Yom Tov because you're allowed to carry. V'im chol Yom Tov Erev Shabbos, but if Yom Tov falls out on Friday, like this year, means Thursday night, Friday, so tzrichem las Erev Yom Tov, then you have to make the Erev Chatzeiros on Thursday afternoon, so you could carry on the Shabbos of second day, or like this in Eretz Yisrael, the Shabbos that follows Yom Tov. Maseches Beitza, Shulchan Aruch 3931. For it appears as though you were preparing on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Means you can't make the Erev. Means what he's pointing at is you can't do the Erev Chatzeiros on Yom Tov itself. You would have to make the Erev Chatzeiros on Erev Yom Tov, like you have to make the Erev Tafshil Erev Yom Tov, obviously. If you did it, the validity of the Erev is questionable, says the Pri Megadim Mishnah Brura. If you forget to do an Erev Tafshilin on Yom Tif, Erev Yom Tif, and you wanted Yom Tif so you could do it, so you could carry on Shabbos, it's not so simple if that could be done. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Actually, it looks like we're going to new sets of laws about how the Eiruv Chatzeiros would affect if your home of sleeping is not the same as your home of eating, dormitories, and all those questions. All right, everyone. Laila Tov. Again, thank you for our sponsors. I want to wish everyone a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Yishav Kabbalah Satara b'Simcha v'Pnimius. Tov Hanir v'Anigla. See each other hopefully here in Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh all together after or on Shavuos itself. Take care. Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good Yom
Bye.
Tov.